All right, I'm here at the Miami Open as I have been all week, and I'm going to give you a little kind of notes dump from the media that I've been working every day for the last week here on the grounds in Miami. It's been an action-packed week. There's been so much going on and a lot of headlines, I would say, to report on. So I'm going to kind of give you the headlines and give you what I've been hearing on the ground about these things, that I've collected. So I think that, the headlines right now as we're talking are the upsets that have happened. Jack Draper lost at the time of recording about half an hour ago to Jakub Mensik. Ben Shelton lost earlier. I was at that match in the third set to Coleman Wong from Hong Kong. That was an insane match with the huge American support there for Ben, him playing into it. But Coleman Wong, who's such an impressive player, ranked just outside the top 100, but his ability to absorb pace and then counterattack right away and return Ben's serve was all incredible. And watching it live, he tried to serve it out. I believe he was up 5-3, couldn't do it. Ben got the break, rallied the crowd, and then went to a tiebreaker. It got to 5-all in the tiebreaker, and you think the guy who's more experienced on the ATP Tour would come out with it. But nope, it was Coleman Wong. So big upset there for Ben and for the American fans looking to see him. We already talked about Alcaraz losing. We already talked about Medvedev losing. And Kyrgios lost, but that's not surprising. But his thoughts later on his form. But for the tournament, that's like Draper, Alcaraz, Medvedev, Shelton. Those are huge names that sell tickets and put butts in seats, and they're out. So that's, I think, a bit crazy for the tournament. And but it also goes to show how tough it is to do well in Indian Wells and then come and play in Miami, even with the extended time off that these players now have. Draper won Indian Wells. Obviously, he comes here, loses in, I believe, his first match today. Alcaraz loses also in his first match to David Goffin. We talked about that. So the conditions here are different, and that's very palpable based on what I've heard every single player in their post-match say. But that's always been the case, and that's what makes the Sunshine Double so tough. We've talked about that on the podcast with JP. I think the biggest storyline from this week, though, is the PTPA class action lawsuit that was announced. It was announced earlier in the week, and we've heard from a lot of players, and we haven't heard from a lot of players on their support or not support for it. Unsupport. I don't know how you call that. Their lack of support. So the most notable one, though, was in media. Djokovic asked about it, and I tweeted out his quote earlier, but he's essentially said there's things I agree with in the PTPA lawsuit and there's things I don't agree with. And he said that the wording used was a little more harsh than he thought. He thought it was harsh or strong language, but he said that the legal team knows what they're doing. Then he was asked why he wasn't signed as a signatory on the bottom of the lawsuit, or his name wasn't on it, and he said, quote, "I want others to step up, other players to step up," which a lot of people don't see as a vote of confidence for the lawsuit from the biggest name by far, who's affiliated with the PTPA and one of the co-founders. So I'll hopefully be talking to Vasek Pospisil next week to ask him some more questions about that. But some things I've heard from the ground again about this lawsuit is I've been talking to players, coaches, agents. One of the main things is that the ATP, the Association of Tennis Professionals, there's obviously things that could be improved in everyone's organization. But what I've been told is that the more egregious discrepancy between the players and the organizers comes at the Grand Slams, which the ITF is named in the lawsuit, but I don't know if the Grand Slams individually are. And so the players, I believe, I've heard from two separate sources, between 13 and 14% of the prize money at the majors, and they receive about 45% of the prize money, 45% of the revenue as prize money on the ATP Tour, compared to 13 and 14% at the majors. So tennis, in my opinion, and this is what I've heard, tennis needs a strong tour. The tour needs to have money. It needs to have excellent people in places to make decisions and run the tour. And if it's defending a lawsuit like this, it's going to draw on the resources that it has and probably not help things for a while. But that's I'm assuming what the PTPA is comfortable with, as they say, a lot of times you have to break down structures to build them back up. But that's just been the biggest news, I think, on the grounds here at the Miami Open so far this year. And yeah, it's been pretty amazing to see. I asked Medvedev about it. He had no comment. He was not for or against it. So the PTPA really does not have many top players putting their name behind this at all. And that's, I think, the news around. That's the biggest storyline around the lawsuit. Nick Kyrgios lost to Karen Khachanov in 2 sets. Close first set, tiebreaker, played a poor tiebreaker, he said, and then got bageled, I believe, in the second set. So his comments afterwards were around how mentally tough the top players are. And he was reminded that if he wants to get back to the form he had in 2022, he has to get back to the mentality he had then, where he said he felt like he could work things out in matches and not get so down on himself. And he admits that he's the first person to get down on himself and be critical, and that his mental game was just not strong. Like, he was just exhausted after the one win versus Mackenzie McDonald, where he did come back. He just didn't have any gas left in the tank, physically, really, or mentally, against Khachanov. But he did say that Khachanov, in that Khachanov match, he was encouraged by his level, because that's a top 20 opponent. And that his wrist was in pain, because I asked him what the difference was between Indian Wells and Miami, and he says he's on 5 painkillers a day just to play, and he wouldn't recommend that for someone younger, but for him, he's doing what he can do to keep playing, because the key is he wants to keep playing. He actually said in the press that feels like he has a lot of tennis left in him, which to me is a different tune than he had been saying for a while back when he was trying to come back from the injury. He just kind of said, I don't know how much longer I have. It kind of seemed like it might have been turning into a bit of a farewell tour. But he seems now, from the little mix zone we did after his match, motivated to keep playing. He said he had a lot of tennis ahead of him, as long as his body allows him. So he seems like he's doing everything he can. So I thought that was an interesting update on that end. Other notes, Denis Shapovalov came through an insane match today where he almost closed it out in 2 sets really quick, really, just bang, bang. It would have been, I believe, 6-3, 6-4. But he wasn't able to serve it out, got broken, lost in the tiebreaker, and then it went to a 3rd set tiebreaker, which he eventually won. Gave a little Steph Curry celebration, which he said afterwards. But he said that one of the hardest things, he was asked a question about playing in 2018, which is 7 years ago, and he says he almost doesn't remember it. And he said that tennis has changed so much since then, and one of the main things is the conditions. We've talked about the balls, the courts, everything. He feels like tennis is much more of a slog. You used to have to have a really good 1-2 punch, and he says that just doesn't get you as far anymore. And we talked about how that's a big, just the difference in the conditions, and in general the balls making the conditions slower is a huge problem. But he also talked about the scheduling between these new extended format Masters 1000s, these 2-week Masters 1000 events. He says there's so much time if you lose in the 3rd or 4th round, which he did in Indian Wells, until he plays his next match at Miami it's like 10 days. And he doesn't have enough time to really go home, but you're just sitting around in Miami like, what are you doing? And I've heard from Dimitrov back in Montreal the same thing. You think it gives the players more rest, but they say it actually doesn't, because when you're on the road with your team and you're still practicing, you still have to go through your routine every day to get ready for matches, to play, and to train, to do whatever. So it's not that relaxing. Being relaxed, they think, is being at home, being able to do whatever you kind of want. So they would, from what I've heard from most players, and Dennis said it today, he would rather have the 7-day, the 1-week Masters like they used to have. And in my opinion, from a fan's perspective, I like that more. But obviously the ATP Tour and the tournaments can make more money by having more days of doing business. So that's a problem that everyone's trying to fix, and the PTPA is definitely addressing in their lawsuit. So yeah, other than that, there's so much. I mean, the Miami tournament's great. It's, in general, it's mainly a rented venue, so they do what they can with the rented venue. There has been some issues today getting people in. One of the things that wasn't great was they had Joao Fonseca versus Humbert in grandstand, which is accessible by people in the with the general grounds passes. But then, almost with no notice, it got moved from grandstand to the stadium court And I'm not sure if people were able to enter the stadium if they had the tickets. And if not, then that's obviously, people were apparently very upset, and they had to like pause the match, the Draper Mensik match, because of all the disruption. So there is some issues here with the layout, but in general, it's very colorful. People seem to be in a great mood. I think once you're here, it's a great tennis viewing experience. And yeah, big tournament, last hardcore tournament before the clay swing for most players. And yeah, to me, one of the big takeaways for me from this week was seeing Joao Fonseca on the grounds here. I talked to all the Brazilians, I talked to a lot of the South Americans. It's already essentially the South American Slam, the Miami Open, but he's just obviously such a superstar already that it's amazing to see. The Brazilian shirts that come out when he's here, a lot of the people I talked to only were here because of Joao Fonseca. So that's pretty amazing to see, and him signing autographs, him being great with the fans, him being great talking to everyone in press. Seems like a very well-spoken, nice kid. Yeah, so he's a star for our sport, and we're lucky to have him, I would say. On the Canadian side, on the women, Victoria Mboko, huge performance here. Almost beat Paula Badoza, the 10th seed, and did beat Camila Osorio in front of a Colombian crowd. She's got serious game, and she will be on the WTA Tour consistently, I believe, very shortly with the game that she has. So encouraged to talk to her and to see her coming up the ranks as a Canadian. That's amazing. Trying to think of what else. I've ran through my notes here, and I think we'll leave it at here because I will still be commenting from Canada, covering the Miami Open once we get back there. But we are done here in Miami for the Slice on YouTube from the ground. So thanks for being here. Thanks for supporting the show. Thanks for subscribing if you haven't. And yeah, let me know in your comments what else you thought about the tournament so far in week 1. Leave your comments below. I'll respond to them. And the next YouTube video I believe we'll be making is the podcast on Monday with JP Hovey, where we'll be breaking down our shared experience and talking about it together. I can't wait for that. We'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. See you from Miami.